Chapter 23, Potter's trial ends with a crash. At last the sleepy air was stirred strongly, and the murder trial came to the court. Everybody talked about it. Tom couldn't get away from it. He felt sure people talked about the murder so that he would tell what he had known about. It kept him in a cold shiver all the time. He took Huck to a lonely place to have a talk with him. He wanted to make sure that Huck hadn't told the secret. Huck, have you ever told anybody about it? About that? Of course I haven't. Never a word? Never a single word. Why? Well, I'm afraid, said Tom. Why, Thomas Sawyer? You wouldn't be alive 2 days if you got it. You know that. Tom felt more comfortable. After a pause, he said, Huck, they couldn't get me to tell, could they? Or you? Get me to tell? Why, if Injun Joe drowned me, they could get me to tell, but no other way. Well, that's right then. I guess we're safe as long as we keep mum, or quiet about the murder. But I'll swear again to make sure. I'm agreed. They swore again with serious feeling. What's the talk, Huck? I've heard a lot of stuff. Talk? Well, it's just Muff Potter, Muff Potter, Muff Potter all the time. It keeps me scared, so I want to hide somewhere. That's the same as I hear, I guess. He's a goner. Don't you feel sorry for him, though, sometimes? Most always. He's no account, but then he has never done anything to hurt anybody. He doesn't work much, but he's kind and good. He gave me half a fish once, and when there wasn't enough for two. Lots of times he stood by me when I was out of luck. Well, he fixed my kites for me, Huck, and put hooks on my line. I wish we could get him out of there. My, we couldn't, though, Tom. Besides, it wouldn't do any good. They'd catch him again. Yes, so they would. But I hate to hear the people talk about him when we know he never did it. The boys had a long talk, but it brought them little comfort. And at the end of the day, they found themselves at the little jail hoping that something would happen to clear the way for Potter. But nothing happened. No one was interested in poor old Muff. The boys went to the cell window and gave Potter some tobacco and matches through the open the window. Well, bars on the window, sorry. He was on the ground, and there was no guards. He was very thankful and said, You've been mighty good to me, boys, better than anybody else in town, and I won't forget it, I won't. They've all forgot old Muff when he's in trouble, but Tom and Huck don't. They don't forget me. Well, boys, I did an awful thing, and now I've got to swing for it. And it's right and best, too. I guess, well, we won't talk about that. I don't want to make you feel bad. You are my friends. Shake hands. Tom went home unhappy. His dreams that night were full of horror. The next day and the day after that, he hung around the courthouse wanting to go in, but staying out. Huck was having the same trouble. They kept away from each other, and from time to time even left the courthouse, but always came back. Tom kept his ears open when people left the courthouse so he could get the news of what was happening. The evidence was closing more and more around poor Potter. What Injun Joe had said against him still stood, and at the end of the second day, the village was sure Muff Potter would be found guilty. That night Tom was out late, and he came to bed through the window. He was very excited, and it was hours before he got to sleep. The next morning all the village was at the courthouse, for this was the great day. The courtroom was packed, and Muff Potter was brought in, pale and thin and without hope. There was chains on his legs and arms, and Injun Joe was there too. The trial continued. Witnesses were called and said that Muff Potter had washed in the brook at the early hours in the morning, and that the murder was discovered, and that his knife was found near the body. Others told of his actions in the graveyard at the morning of the murder, and at last the lawyer tried to prove Potter's guilty by saying, We have fastened this awful crime on the prisoner. We shall rest our case here. A groan came from poor Potter. He put his face in his hands, and the courtroom was silent. Potter's lawyer rose and said, Call Thomas Sawyer. There was surprise on every face, even Potter's. Every eye was on Tom as he rose and took his place upon the witness stand. The boys looked wild and badly scared. Potter's lawyer said, Thomas Sawyer, where were you on the 17th of June about the hour of midnight? Tom glanced at Injun Joe's iron face, and his tongue failed him. The people listened, but the words wouldn't come, and after a moment, however, Tom got up a little strength and whispered, "In the graveyard." "A little louder, please. Don't be afraid. You were in the graveyard." Injun Joe smiled. "Were you anywhere near Hoss Williams' grave?" "Yes, sir." "Speak up just a trifle louder. How near were you?" "Near as I am to you." "Were you hid or not?" "I was hid." "Where?" "Behind the elms that were at the edge of the graveyard." Injun Joe moved a little. "Anyone with you?" "Yes, sir. There was with—" Wait a minute. Never mind mentioning your company's name. We will produce him at a proper time. Did you carry anything there with you?" Tom hesitated and looked ashamed. "Speak out, boy. Don't be shy. The truth is always good. What did you take there?" "Only a dead cat." "We will produce the bones of this cat. Now, my boy, tell us everything that occurred. Tell it in your own way. Do not skip anything, and don't be afraid." Tom began slowly at first, but soon his words came easily. Every ear, every eye was fixed upon him as the people listened to his story, and at last he came to the murder and said, "And as Dr. Potter grabbed the board and hit Muff Potter in the head, Muff fell. Injun Joe grabbed the knife and crash! Quick as lightning, Injun Joe sprang for the window and got away from the people who tried to stop him and was gone."